Yes, it's whatever time. It's the beginning of the hour.
I
So,
got you.
Yeah, I got you.
um,
Okay.
hello. This is a webinar for the System Dynamic Society pre-college education group. We have some wonderful friends attending. Glad to see you all here. I would like to introduce, well, I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but Jennifer Brandsburg Egelman and
Excellent. Yeah.
Egelman, I'm sorry,
It's
Engelman,
okay. Yeah.
yes.
Thanks.
And Henny, where are you, Henny? I don't see, oh, there, Henny Van Dongen, sorry about. And Henny will be our speakers today, and they are going to talk about a very interesting project that they have originated and worked on and have some wonderful materials to share online. So rather than take up any more time, I would like to pass it to Jennifer.
Great. I'm going to share my slides. We didn't test this, so I hope it's going to work. Uh, there we go. Do you see
Good.
them?
Yes, we
Yeah,
see them.
perfect. Okay. I just need to get the slideshow going. Great. Okay. And I'm going to make this a bit smaller. Okay, perfect. So yeah, thanks so much, Diana and Emery, for the invitation today to share the Regenerative Economics project that Henny and I have been working on. What we hope to do today in this session is to give you an overview of the project, and then Henny, I'm going to give you that overview, and then Henny is going to talk a bit about how we have incorporated systems thinking into the course. And then we think the presentation will take probably about a half an hour, and then there'll be plenty of time for questions and discussion after that. So yeah, I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. Yeah, my name is Jennifer Brandsburg Engelman. I am the project lead and the lead author for the work that we're doing on regenerative economics. I now have actually, it's closer to 30 years experience as a secondary school teacher. I was an examiner for a long time, also textbook author for several textbooks. And most of that time was spent teaching economics in the International Baccalaureate program. But later in my career, I also took up teaching business management and environmental systems and societies, and started doing quite a bit of change-making work with students using a kind of a design cycle and also systems thinking in that change-making work with kids. And now Henny's going to say a few words about herself as well.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Henny. I'm originally based in the Netherlands. There, I have been a teacher and also been a developer of let's say a textbook author of a very a well-known textbook, an economics textbook in the Netherlands. I now develop educational materials, and I'm mostly working on systems of provisioning. That's my interest, my basic interest at the moment. So yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Henny. Yeah, so as I mentioned at the top of the presentation, I'm going to give you a little bit of information about the origin of the project, why we're engaged in it, what we have produced in response to the why, and then Henny is going to take up the role of systems thinking in the project. So the origin of this project, I actually love to share it because the origin actually came from students. So, I mean, I had been interested in new economic theories for a while, but really the impetus came from a project from two student organizations, Students Organizing for Sustainability, SOS UK, and Teach the Future. And they had this really great idea where they asked academics and teachers to completely rewrite the English national curriculum in all the grades and in all the subjects to include sustainability everywhere. And the thinking behind this was that they wanted to revise all the curriculum documents so that at some point when there was an opening for curriculum change, because that doesn't happen with a regular process in the UK, it takes a political change usually to get curriculum change. But they saw the possibility for a new Labour government coming in, and they thought we really want to be ready, and we're going to rewrite all these curriculum documents so that it's all ready to go once that opening comes. And because of some work I had done in the past with sustainability and economics, I was asked by these two student organizations to work on both economics and business. And the thing about economics, unlike many other subjects, where the syllabus just needed small tweaks in other subjects to bring in sustainability, economics is quite different, because to really do it properly, you need to rethink the entire discipline. So knowing that that was quite a big task, I asked Kate Rayworth, who's in the picture here, whether she would help. She's the author of Donut Economics. She teaches at Oxford. And she agreed, and she brought in a few more academics, and I brought in a few more teachers. And we rewrote, first of all, the GCSE syllabus, which is, I guess you would be the year 11 certificate for most students, grade 10 in the United States equivalent. So it's the kind of before the last 2 years of school, that leaving certificate. And then later we also did the A levels. On the side, I also did business management, but that required a lot less revision. But we completely rewrote the syllabus, and I wasn't content to just sort of let this document lie around and hope that somebody picks it up for change, and decided that it was a really good opportunity now that we had something comprehensive to try to bring it to life and see if we could get a movement going for changing the way economics is taught, not just in the English national curriculum, but really everywhere all over the world, because the way economics is taught is actually very similar in countries around the world. So that's how the project got its start. And I really like to think of this project as a response to the meta crisis, these multiple interconnected crises to do with climate change, and then resulting mass migration and development of pandemics and development of AI without guardrails, and epidemics of loneliness and mental health issues, and also the rise of political leaders around the world with authoritarian intentions. My contention is that these interconnected problems are connected by the way our economies are designed, that at the moment our degenerative economies are weakening social and ecological systems. And unfortunately, rather than being a solution to these problems, economics courses very often perpetuate degenerative economies. And so therefore, we really need to pay attention to what we're teaching. This is a really important issue, because powerful people around the world in both business and in politics have economics degrees, or if they don't have degrees, then all their advisors have economics degrees or business degrees. And the economic worldviews that we help them develop shape how these people act and what policies they bring about. And so it's really important that we do a really good job with these courses, and that we're not perpetuating these degenerative economic systems that are underpinning the meta crisis. So what I'd like to do now is to spend a little bit of time explaining the why. I mean, this is partly the why, what I've been talking about now, but the problem that we see with these courses. And I tried to gather together kind of a lot of the critiques of our current economics courses on this one slide. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time now trying to unpack this for you, because it's very much relevant to systems thinking. So our current economics courses, what they do is they draw a relatively narrow systems boundary around markets, and they treat markets as though markets are the economy. And drawing this narrow systems boundary, really zooming in like this on markets, has the unfortunate consequence of either marginalizing or completely ignoring all non-market activity. So in this slide, you can see this narrow systems boundary around markets. And then in the upper right-hand corner, I've got the state. And the state is obviously, for those of you who have taken an economics course before, you know that the state is covered in one sense or another in these courses, but it's highly marginalized. And we even use language that indicates that states are outside the systems boundary. So we talk about the state intervening in the economy, as though it's not part of the economy, but is intervening in it. That the state imposes regulations, that taxes are a burden. So we've got all this really loaded language that both illustrates the way in which the state is marginalized, but also a kind of neoliberal ideology that permeates these courses that is really pushing the state aside, so that market framing has a dominance in these courses. But this is not the only issue, because it's not only that the state is marginalized, but we also marginalize society and the environment. And in fact, we don't really even have a language in these courses to talk about the social and ecological impacts except through the lens of markets, using the idea of market failures. It's the only time in these courses that we really address social and ecological impacts or even influences. And we use this term externalities, again, this kind of language that shows you that we consider this outside the boundary, the narrow systems boundary that we've drawn. And then over in the lower left-hand corner, you can see, it's barely visible in the slide, is household care and domestic work. This is completely ignored in these courses. It's the household is a really, really important provisioning institution in the economy, but we don't address it in these courses. If the household gets any attention at all, it's only really addressed as a consumer of things from markets. And in fact, I always laugh because, in fact, in the Luxembourg curriculum, it actually says very, very clearly that household, the main function of households is to consume things from markets. It's like in black and white and in big bold text, which as a mother and you know, in my thinking about my family and all the work that I do, care work in my own household, just makes me really, really angry. It is not my purpose in life to consume things from markets, right? I've got a much bigger role in the economy and in the lives of the people around me. But in any case, so we've got this provisioning institution that is very, very important and that is completely ignored. And then we also have the commons, which is, I'm using the term commons here differently from the way you might have heard it. I'm not referring to commons as just a resource. I'm referring to it as a resource, a group of people who are managing the resources, who are using it and are related to the resource, and the co-created rules that they develop in order to manage their engagement with each other in that resource. So we're talking about commons as a relational system, not just as a resource. And this is also completely ignored in these courses, even though commoning has been the dominant way that human beings have organized economic activity for most of human history. And it is still extremely important in indigenous communities around the world. And in fact, in all of our communities, there is commoning going on. And it's extremely important for human well-being, like the household, but we don't give it any attention. If the commons gets attention at all in these courses, it usually has the word tragedy in front of it and somehow gives kids the opinion or gives kids the understanding that if human beings find it impossible to cooperate with one another to manage resources, which is a real shame because we're hugely cooperative beings. And it's very, very important that we recognize the conditions under which that cooperation really thrives. And so studying the commons is also extremely important. And then you also see on the right-hand side there, also faded out there, is this issue of values and ethics, which is also not allowed to be discussed in these courses because even though at the beginning we talk about the distinction between positive and normative economics, we immediately dismiss the normative piece and say, you know, what we're really concerned about is the positive sort of facts of what's going on in the world. And we kind of dismiss that sort of values and ethics-based component. But it's really problematic to do that because it is impossible, as I'm sure you are all aware as systems thinkers, to have value-free education. And in fact, when we look inside this systems boundary at the way markets are treated, we can see lots and lots of values promoted in these courses. And they're not necessarily the ones that most people think are important or are teaching their own children. And one of the ones that you see there is that human beings are selfish, utility maximizing individuals. This underpins many of the models, that businesses are and should be maximizing profit. Again, it's a key piece of many of the models that students learn. I probably had, when I was teaching economics in the International Baccalaureate, I think I probably had my students drawing that profit maximizing point like 100 times before they took their exam, right? We just drill it into them as a part of these models. And we see price as being the metric of value, really the only metric of value that students are exposed to, that endless, aimless growth is both possible and, you know, a goal or an appropriate goal for the economy. And then even on day one, we're starting them out with this narrative of scarcity, that there's not enough. And this narrative of scarcity is extremely important, is extremely harmful because it involves two premises. So on the one hand, it says in order to get scarcity, we've got limited resources. And I think we can all agree that that's the case. Resources are limited. They're either stock limited or they're flow limited. Yeah. But the other piece, we don't have scarcity just from having limited resources. We also need this other piece of the argument, which is that human needs and wants are unlimited. And this is a highly contentious claim, but is never unpacked in these courses, at least at secondary school level. And there's a good argument to be made that human needs are not unlimited. We know what they are, we can quantify them, and human wants are also not unlimited because actually they're socially shaped. And this kind of endless striving for more and more and more is something that is driven. It's not exclusively driven, but it is driven to a large degree in our current societies by business activity and advertising that is striving to increase revenues and maximize profits. Human beings are other regarding. I'm not trying to claim that that's not the case, and accumulation is material accumulation is one way of developing status, but it's not the only way. And as societies, we can also shape these values as well. So I hope that this gives you kind of like the big picture of some of the problems that we see with the current way we're teaching economics. But I think it's extremely important that we don't just stop here at the criticisms. Part of the reason why new economic thinking often fails to gain traction, I think at universities and with business leaders, et cetera, is that we don't take enough time to present a viable alternative for what we're doing. Yeah. So if these are all the things that are wrong, then what can we do instead? So what we're trying to do is present an alternative model. And this is what we're using. So this model that you see in front of you is the embedded economy model. It appears in Donut Economics. It is not the Donut Economics model. That's a different diagram. But this embedded economy model provides a really nice framework for widening the systems boundary of the course, right? So instead of zooming in just on markets, we have chosen with this course to zoom right out and widen that boundary. And by zooming out, you get a number of really important advantages with this framing. So for one thing, you get some really interesting new opportunities for systems thinking. The course becomes much more interdisciplinary. In fact, students in the course that we have put together, there is knowledge of basic ecology that comes right at the very beginning of the course, which I think is extremely important. I would argue that you really can't be a good economist unless you know something about ecology. It works to end human nature dualism. So rather than thinking about ecosystems as being external to our economic system, we recognize the fully embedded nature of our economies in Earth systems and ourselves as individuals also in Earth systems. And it also really nicely allows us to draw in multiple economic schools of thought, including feminist economics, which gives us the framing for the household section. So that's got the kind of basic ideas that rather than zooming in, we're zooming out, and this brings all kinds of advantages in terms of studying economics. So I'm just going to quickly run through, I'm going to kind of pick this apart, unpack this diagram a little bit. So here you see the economy being presented not just as markets with a kind of marginalized state. We have also added unpaid household care and domestic work, the household provisioning institution, and commons as a provisioning institution into the course. And we give them equal weight. So it's not like we're discussing markets for 90% of the time, and then we kind of sprinkle in a little bit of this other stuff. Rather, we've got dedicated topics to the household. And we start with the household, by the way. The household, markets, commons, and states, they each get their own separate topic. And in those topics, we spend a lot of time unpacking the relationships between these institutions, because as you know, with systems thinking, it's extremely important not just to distinguish, but also find relationships between them. And that reveals a lot of these other points, the kind of social factors, which are woven in through the course, not ignored. So we are very happy to talk about values in this course, and there's a lot of values embedded in it. Power runs through the entire course, so it's not just discussed in like a small section on monopolies and oligopolies, but in fact, we take up the issue of power again and again and again and again through the course. Narratives, these kind of mental models that we have framed through the stories we tell about the economy, history, law, politics, culture, social norms, all of these things are woven through the course in a way that you don't usually find in introductory economics courses. And then finally, the economy and society are embedded in our systems. So we acknowledge right at the start, right at the beginning, students are studying a little bit of ecology, but we recognize at the start that our economy is 100% dependent on living matter and materials from Earth systems and energy from Earth systems, and that every economic activity we undertake has impacts on those systems: waste, heat, waste matter, CO2 emissions, etc. Yeah. So, and this is not just discussed in one little part of the course, but it comes up again and again and again and again and again all through the course. Now, just to give you an idea of how that plays out in terms of the structure of the course, these are the topics that we cover. So we have a topic specifically on systems, which Henny's going to tell you about in a few minutes. And then we have an introduction that kind of lays out this embedded economy model and introduces students to the way the economy is embedded in society and our systems. Then we have a topic on each of these provisioning institutions: household, markets, commons, and state. And as I mentioned, these are not treated sort of in isolation, but there's a lot of time spent on the relationships between these institutions. Topic 6 is on money and finance, and topic 7 is on international exchanges. This is still a work in progress. As you can imagine, we're writing this, these topics are meant for a 2-year-long course, so this is a lot of material that we're putting together, and it's extremely comprehensive, including text and also activities and further exploration for students and all the terminology and all kinds of games you can play with the terms, and just it's jam-packed with materials that teachers can use. So it's a really big project, and we've finished through topic 5, the state, and we've also done topic S on systems. I'm currently writing the money and finance section, and then we'll do the last one, and I'm hoping, fingers crossed, depends on how much I get done this summer, but we're hoping to have it done maybe in September. Yeah, so that's where the project stands. I thought it would also be nice to kind of give you an idea about our theory of change, our theory of systems change, if you will, for this project, because we're not just out here writing a book and sort of like hoping that something good happens. We are really taking kind of a systems perspective and turning in terms of trying to shift global education systems. You can see here the book in the lower right-hand corner here, the work on the book, the syllabus, and the specifications. For those of you who don't know what a specification is, it's like you take the syllabus, which is like a 5 or 6 page document, and you map out in much greater detail what the content is. That's what a specification is. So this book and the syllabus and specifications have 2 big purposes. So first of all, we're trying to give teachers and students some material to enable them to use these, to integrate regenerative economic thinking into their courses right now. So many teachers around the world recognize that their economics courses are not fit for purpose. They want to do something about it, but they're stuck with their mandated syllabi, and high-stakes exams at the end. But they can do something. They can integrate a little bit. They can find some footholds. And the fact that we've got these materials enables them to pick things up quite easily and to try to integrate them. And we're helping teachers do that by mapping regenerative economics to mainstream syllabi around the world. So we've got 6 of them mapped out right now, and we're just going to keep going. Like every time I get a chance, I'm kind of dipping in and creating a spreadsheet to help teachers find the footholds. So helping teachers use and integrate this material right away at a kind of grassroots level is one point, but the other point of this work, which is equally, perhaps maybe even more important, is the influence it can have on the institutional, the international and national education authorities at institutional level. Because I've been around long enough, almost 30 years in the business, I have been through several curriculum revision sessions. And what I can tell you is that it's extremely difficult to get curricula revised in any kind of substantial way. More often than not, what happens is small changes, or maybe some things are like added on to the syllabus, but any kind of deep, meaningful change is really difficult to get. And in part, that there's a number of dynamics there, but one of the reasons is that when people recognize that big change is needed, there's often not something for them to look at to as a kind of model or a vision for an alternative way of doing things. So I think because we're doing a comprehensive piece of work, a really detailed piece of work, of what I think is an academically rigorous piece of work, that this is providing those institutions with that alternative vision, and it's going to make it easier for them to let go of some of the old paradigms that they've been stuck with and they know are really flawed. And it's going to make it easier to get bigger shifts in the future. The teachers' work as well is quite important for that institutional change, because as teachers are working at the grassroots level with their students, it's also providing that kind of social proof that the institutions need, that the teachers on the ground actually want it. It also makes it more likely that teachers raise their hand to participate in curriculum review processes as an agent for change. And the hope is that we can trigger some social tipping points in the various countries where we're working to really move those institutions along. And we're in a really interesting moment right now, and I don't know if such a moment is going to come around again, actually. And so that's why, for me personally, this work feels extremely urgent. And I'm quite excited to give it like as much of a kind of audience as we could possibly get everywhere we go, because we have 4 education institutions right now that are working on revising curriculum, and more specifically economics. And one of them is the International Baccalaureate, is working on economics revision right now. They've just started in the past few months. And they're revising economics. Netherlands is also, the country is working on revising its national economics curriculum and business economics as well. Scotland and England are both engaged in a national curriculum review of the entire national curriculum. It's unclear right now whether economics will be opened up for review in England. We're working hard to convince them that there are enough problems with the current syllabus that they should be looking at it again. Scotland seems quite ready to make some changes to their curriculum. I've had a number of conversations with them, and it's really quite exciting, actually. They're very open. And you might know that Scotland is one of the wellbeing economy governments. And so this kind of thinking about re-envisioning our economies for people and planet is something that is in line with at least their stated goals as a government. So I find that quite promising. My theory and my hope is that if we can shift these 4 institutions in this direction, that it's going to trigger some global social tipping points in education institutions, in other secondary schools, education institutions around the world, and that we're going to start to see a wave of change in this direction. And this window of opportunity is relatively narrow. Yeah, I mean, these curriculum review processes, they take a little while to happen, but we're really in this moment right now. And so that's why I'm writing frantically and doing lots of webinars and, doing everything we possibly can to talk to people about these ideas to try to get this shift, because it won't last forever. This window is relatively narrow, and I don't know when we're going to have so many of these organizations making this move at the same time. So that's the end of my piece. I'm happy to answer questions later after Henny talks to you about how systems thinking is integrated. And I'm going to stop sharing now, and then Henny's going to then share her screen.
Sorry about that. I was muted. So can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, we can. I think you can do, if you do the slideshow in the upper right hand. Okay, good.
I just want to check. Otherwise, I needed to problem solve a little. Okay, how is system thinking integrated? I, uh, I want to cover three topics. The topic S, that Jennifer already mentioned, and the systems of provisioning as a background, and how we integrated it in through our texts and activities. So first, if you go to the Regenerative Economics website, that's regenerativeeconomics.earth, you will find topic S there, and you can see what we have covered on system thinking here. What you will notice that it's not just system dynamics, because we believe that economics as such is a social science, not a beta science. So not all data, not all economic behavior can be quantified. So we cover all kinds of models, including agent-based and network models, but not in such a deep way that we go into it as actually making a model with students, but get them acquainted with the principles of the model. And we start out with some skills that students need to be able to think as a system thinker. And for that, they need some cognitive skills, and some might be acquainted with the method that we use. That's the DSRP method of Derek Cabrera. So that's all included in the system thinking and models part of the textbook, of the online textbook. And in every part of the textbook, we refer to the sections of the chapter, of the S chapter, that the students might need to be able to understand references to diagrams or models, or to do the activities. So it's fully integrated in all the other parts of the online textbook. So that's it. But we do think that if teachers want to integrate, want to make that shift towards system thinking in economics, then it would be wise that they first cover the topic, so it's easier for students, because it's more difficult to learn system thinking on the go while you're also learning about economics. So that's a way to look at it. So that's where you can find it. Then there is this other thing that's been introduced in the course. That's the systems of provisioning. You already heard Jennifer say institutions of provisioning, because the system of provisioning, that's both physical and social. So physical, it means like technology, infrastructure. Think of like the piping when you're thinking about water supply. And the social part is not just the institutions. Jennifer already mentioned household, market, states, and commons, but also things like social norms, rules, laws, culture. All these things that make economics a social science is also part of a system of provisioning, but also part of the course. But the course itself, and you look at the chapters, is divided in household, market, states, and commons. So those are the systems, the institutions of provisioning, but it's shaped from this viewpoint of systems of provisioning. And systems of provisioning can have three different outcomes: social outcomes, ecological outcomes, and economic outcomes. And economic outcomes, I think it's important to mention that it's not like we think in terms of like GDP growth, but we think in terms of security, like food security, and in terms of continuity, like some things might not be scarce at the moment, like a limited resource at the moment, but it might be a limited resource in the future. So that's something that's also like a red thread through the whole book, and I think it's really important, if you want students to learn about systems, that you show them systems. So that's what we're doing. And then I'll talk a little bit about how this is then laid out in the text and in activities. One thing Jennifer does really nicely is that she makes this connection between nature and human beings. And that also has to do with how do we look at nature? Is it something that serves us, or do we think of ourselves as part of nature? And she has some really nice examples where you can see how nature is working similar to how the human economy is working, like for example in the ants example, or how nature is shaping its environment, and this is also important for humans, like the example of the changing rivers because of how wolves got reintroduced. So this is one part of how systems are integrated in the text. Another part is that when we want to make things clear, and sometimes these are complex relationships, we use causal loop diagrams and stock flow diagrams to integrate it integrates in the text to make complex relationships clear. So it's not that we are simulating models, but we use the models, the diagrams, to show a difficult relationship. Because if you have a visual something, it's often much more easier to understand than when you only read it in text. So that's where we use them in the text. And then we also use these models in some of the activities where they have to finish a model, or they have to interpret a model, or they have to draw it themselves. So these are all kinds of ways this can be included. Now, I must say, Jennifer and I wrote a position paper about the shifts we think needed for economics education. And we thought of 5 shifts, and system thinking is one of these shifts. And you can imagine that taking on such a project, especially Jennifer was doing all the lead authoring work, and it's a huge load of work because it's all rather new. When I was doing the reviewing work, I learned a lot about the parts of the economy I didn't learn when I went to university and when I was a teacher. So it's quite a lot. So we say it's a work in progress. So if anybody who wants to start working with this material and want to use system thinking, and they have ideas that we didn't come up with yet, please share it with us because we are open for improvement. But like I said, we want 5 shifts. So we try to share our energy and focus as much as possible between all of them, and try to integrate as much system thinking as we can do now, as we can think of now at the moment. So I think I covered everything about system thinking. Yes, I did. So if you want to know a little bit more about the project, you can go to YouTube at Regenerative Economics. That's a channel. You can go to the regenerativeeconomics.earth site for the online textbook itself. And for us, a big thank you for being here tonight, for listening, having the patience to listen to us. And if you have any questions, please ask them either in the chat, or you can make yourself known by putting up your hand. Thank you. And now I stop sharing.
Thank you, Jennifer and Henny. That was a wonderful presentation and very stimulating. Do we have any questions? Okay, Len?
Hi, Diana.
Hi, Len.
Comments and questions got me thinking. I teach graduate students microeconomics. And on day one, I have no idea who they are. And I ask if anybody has a background in, let's say, sociology or psychology or geography, etc. And I claim that I'm just looking at the same problems from a different point of view, from the point of view of the traditional economic theorist, so that I don't get in too much trouble, basically, right? And I really like a lot of the things you said about what different measures are. And I say, let's throw away prices and use well-being as our yardstick. And then there's a discussion about, well, how do you measure well-being? So that goes down the tubes and we go back to prices. The other question, I have a question for you. Have you been getting attacks from other subject areas? Let's say the sociologists, the ecologists, the psychologists saying, wait a minute, we already cover these ideas in our courses. Why the overlap? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I'll address that. So, no, to be honest, they're just so, whenever I do talk to people in other disciplines, they're actually really happy that the economists, that this work is like waking up to the fact that that these elements of these other disciplines are so relevant. So, to be honest, the economists, I think, get attacked by these other disciplines because they have this narrow systems boundary view, and they are less willing, I think, than in many other disciplines to go out of their silo. So quite the opposite, actually.
Yeah, yeah. And then I don't know how many folks online know about the little cartoon video called The Impossible Hamster. Has everybody seen that? I'll put it in the chat. If you want to talk about growth, especially, I show my microeconomics students this video. And then I was thinking about, is those fellows who do Freakonomics, where they claim to take core microeconomic principles and then just apply them to very strange problem areas, like the naming of your children is one that sits in my mind. But yeah, and then of course there's the certification boards and the curriculum committees that you have to fight against, at least in the.
It's funny that you bring up the Freakonomics, actually, because I just had a conversation. Well, actually, it wasn't a conversation yet, but I've just been messaging with someone, apparently Steve Levitt, who's the University of Chicago professor as a part of that duo. He's starting a new school, apparently. And so someone from their team, their startup team, reached out to ask about this because she's quite excited about regenerative economics. Now, I did tell her, and we had like a nice exchange, messaging exchange, because I don't think that this is up his alley. Like it's, if anything, it's kind of a response against the University of Chicago, right? So I'd be totally shocked if he was like, "Oh yes, let's do this in the school I'm starting." But I thought it was interesting. Who knows?
Yeah. It makes me jealous that I can't do all of this within, and Dave, you might know, David, what is AACSB, American Association for Colleges and Schools of Business? Is that what it stands for?
I guess, yeah.
Well, those certification boards.
Yeah.
You claim you want to be certified to be a business school, therefore you teach X, Y, Z, and you teach them this way.
Yeah.
So
well, I think what you're bringing up, and I think that I thought about this as I was listening to Henny and Jennifer, is the idea that these high pressure exams at the end of the course are really at least 50% exams on the way we teach, what we taught you how to learn about economics. So what I would like to do is move away from that and have some common questions that different ways of teaching economics all should be expected to answer, and get away from show us how we shifted this marginal cost curve. That's irrelevant. If it helps you answer the question, that's great. But what we're really interested in is what did you learn about the way the economy functions? And I think there are different strokes for different folks here. And those of us who teach economics differently, I'm including the people who teach it differently from me, should be willing to say, ultimately, these are the things that filter through our methodology. These are the things that people should be learning. And if we could all agree on some fundamental issues and questions that need to be addressed, and then just have a little competition to see if we can all who can do better.
Yeah.
And I would put my students after they've, well, maybe not my students today, but the students I envision as a result of the work I'm doing, I hope to put them up against anybody.
Now, one little anecdote, and this is someone you know, David. So a student was taking a course in, I don't know, environmental something or other in secondary school, high school in the US. And they learned about systems thinking and a little bit of system dynamics. And then they took the national, what are those things called? The advanced placement exam?
Yeah, the AP exam is classic, what I'm talking about, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. And that particular student scored, was one of the 50 people in the United States that's got a perfect score. And that student told me that the only reason that she got a perfect score was she knew about systems thinking and system dynamics, because some of the questions could not be answered unless you thought that way.
I think what you're talking about right now is something that I've heard said about the way Diana taught calculus. The students would go off to university and perform better than many expected in a freshman or lower level calculus course, because they had the background that Diana had provided.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Okay. I saw also some remarks in the chat, but maybe Celia would like to elaborate a little bit on what he's saying, because he's mentioning somebody I don't know about, so I really won't be able to answer that question. I see Stephen also has a question, but maybe Celia was there. I saw his question first, so maybe Celia, do you want to say a little bit more about that? Because yeah, like I said, I don't know the man you're talking about, so it's really doesn't.
Oh, Jürgen Randers. He co-wrote the Limits to Growth.
Oh, okay,
Limits
that's
to
your
Growth.
saying. Okay,
The
yeah,
book.
okay.
Yeah. 50
Okay.
years ago. And
I said sorry about that, Celia. I thought you were a man. I hear now. Okay, yeah.
I'm in Norway. And I met Jürgen several times, and only this one time I asked him about what if we design sort of a course that you can teach students in economics about how the economy is coupled to the planet.
Yeah.
And he was very frustrated because he had tried several times, and no such course exists in Norway. So that's just my comment.
Yeah, no, I can react a little bit to that, because I've been working in the field of developing sustainability materials, and what I know, there's a lot of people are working in that field, and everybody has ideas about how it can be better. But if you look at how can schools adopt this, they can only adopt it by working in a project week, or at the end of the semester when it's almost holiday, and so there are a lot of people offering materials for this limited amount of time, and that's why Jennifer took this up as a whole rewriting of the current economic curriculum, which is really different from adding another course on and showing through another course how it can be done, because then it's only a project week, and then next year we're going to do a project on fashion, and the year after we're going to do another project, and that's not going to land and not going to stick. So that's why you need to approach it like the project Jennifer has embarked on.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that very quickly. It's not just about developing these materials and just throwing them out there and hoping that somebody takes them up. We're being really, really assertive. We're networking with people. We are spreading the word. I've got because I was an international teacher for so many years and also an examiner and textbook author, I had already quite a wide network. But I have been working now for years at developing contacts with people all over. I'm constantly talking to people in the UK, in the Netherlands. I just did a workshop in the Netherlands with teachers. So we're really, and I know these processes, the curriculum change processes at these national and international level now, and we're really working on trying to shape what happens in those, because how do you get some people for change at the table? And to start moving that process forward. And that's a very much a different project from just coming up with a course and throwing it out in the world and hoping that something happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve?
Yeah, well, Jennifer, number one, thank you for saying all of that, because you've addressed, I think, my question. But first of all, let me just applaud you both on doing this. I also was a long time secondary school educator, taught biology, and have used systems and systems thinking in my classes for almost, well, in fact, all of the 30 years that I taught at public school. So I think this is a way to get this kind of thinking out there into the ether. But I also, as an observation, will say that the way you describe this and the way you're going about it feels very close to the way that we have tried very hard in the United States to bring systems thinking and system dynamics into science classes and math classes, and have had very little success. Diana, I think, could speak to this as well. But we've been trying. It's not as if we haven't been trying and we haven't been talking and haven't been networking. And in fact, it's even gotten into the national standards for science. At least modeling has gotten that far. But it feels like we just cannot get any traction. And I as much as I applaud all that you're doing, I worry, I think, that you'd put all this work in and then it would only get to a certain point, and certain schools and certain people would be using it, but others wouldn't. And in large part, I think David hit on some of it. I think from my point of view, the issue in at least biological education has been the standards. Is that we have to meet these certain standards, and teachers get interested in doing it systemically, but then they say, well, wait a minute, we only have so much time and we have to get the kids to this point and we can't take the time to do this. So it's more of a comment, and maybe you could speak to it a little bit.
Yeah, I'll just respond to that quickly and just say, so I'm aware of this. I mean, this is not my first rodeo. I'm over 50. I've seen a lot, so I'm aware of the high potential for failure. But both my kids are out of the house, and was in the classroom for a long time, and this is my second act, and so I'm just going to throw everything I've got to it because I worry about my kids, and I think our economic systems are just so. I mean, people say, like, on the one hand, you say they're broken. On the other hand, people say they're doing exactly what they're designed to do. Like, I think about it in both ways. So, I'm just going to do it and see what happens. But the other thing that I'll say is that, for example, we're not focused on the United States at all because the school system is too decentralized. And also the political environment there is not conducive to what we're trying to promote anyway. But we're really focused on places where there's a national curriculum, where we know that they're in the process. Like, so I'm not, like, right now, we have a lot of people in India, for example, who are using the materials. And also the United States is actually the largest user. I can see that with the Google Analytics. But we're just not focused there because it's not the right moment, it's not the right time. The system doesn't function in a way that we can find a really good leverage point for having a high impact. But yeah, so I'm well aware of all these issues. We're trying to be strategic, and not. But I'm well aware that it might not work. But I don't. This is the thing that I know how to do, and so I'm just going to do it.
Yeah. Well, keep up the good work.
Coming from, right?
Yeah.
I'd like to make a couple of comments, but I will do that after Elizabeth has a chance to speak.
Thank you. Hi, I just wanted to say this is wonderful and very inspiring. I worked for 10 years in Shenzhen, China, and worked with internationalizing the curriculum. And I used DSRP. I used systems thinking with the principals, and they're very engaged and working through in their own way. And they have that kind of curriculum that you need. They have a very structured, not autonomous, but the teachers are able to develop quite a lot in their processes with the right principles. So it's a very good time because it takes us back to what the regenerative, the restoration economy the planetary restoration economy that we have to be completely engaged in now, especially now. And thank you. Thank you for everything.
Thank you. I think that one leverage point that I know I have overlooked is trying to get to professors who train teachers of content for two reasons. They've done that in Turkey, and really I should be letting Emre say this, but I'm going to say it because they've done this in Turkey. Professors who train teachers, especially secondary school teachers, for certain disciplines have, one, the ability to expose those students to systems thinking and larger perspectives and slightly different perspectives than traditional instruction, if those teachers are inclined. And then the teachers then have these tools when they enter the classroom and have 100 things they're trying to do their first year or second. But they are often the people who are asked to be on standards committees and on those higher level change committees. And so I think there's a real leverage point there, is trying to access those people. But you've got to find people who are willing to listen to you. The other thing is, everything you've said about economics can be said about mathematics. It's narrow, it's very, very out of date. What we teach in many of our math classes is very out of date and very narrow, but teachers can still do this. I think the fact that your book is online is extremely valuable because teachers who are inclined to do something differently have an automatic, wonderful resource to be able to access for some ideas. But I was trained traditionally in mathematics, but I was always unhappy. It seemed like I was never happy with what I had done. And so I was always looking for things to try in my class. Even though I have a curriculum I'm supposed to follow, when I close the door, it's my classroom. As long as I know what I'm trying to prepare students for, and I follow the responsibility of making sure the students have a chance to do well on some of the exams, and I can change the methodologies I used to teach those topics and to bring in special things. But it has to be throughout the whole curriculum. If it is not, if systems thinking and this different approach to the subject is not throughout the curriculum, the students don't understand that that is a big part of what they're trying to learn. It's not just a 2-week project. It is the way we want you to think about this topic and interact with this topic. And that's a little hard to get other teachers, but I, like you, Jennifer, this is my second career. I've already finished. My kids are out of the house, and I've retired from high school teaching. But it is so important to me that this is where the future needs to go, that I think it's worth the energy that I have until I can't do it anymore. So I'm right there with you. Emre?
And I want to add one thing about intervention or collaboration with university or academia. At least for Turkey, the professors is a very, very late target because they are already a professor. So this needs to be done at most PhD level, for example, or much better master research, for example. So in the very first years, all academicians need something new, and we have that new thing. And if they start with it, inevitably they go with it. But this, of course, needs time. And in 10 years, for example, we have one professor 2 associate professors and maybe 10 or 15 master students. But when you start, you know that in 10 years or 20 years, you will have professors that will be on that standards table that will be shaping the curriculum.
Right. Absolutely. And we have to think that our students, now we have to look at this long term, but the students who go through our programs, I think will eventually bring this into their work. It's just that it's going to be a while before they get there.
Yeah, I mean, I will add to that though, my hope, and maybe it's misguided and naive, I don't know, but I'm hoping that I don't have to wait for the kids who are going to come through this to make the change, but that doing this is going to just be yet another pressure point, for example, on universities to start diversifying what they're doing in economics. It's also a message to politicians and business leaders, right? If you get this change at the grassroots level and at the secondary school level, secondary schools are a reflection, and schools in general are a reflection of the social norms of society, but they also impact the social norms of society, right? And so if you can, and again, I don't know if it's going to work. Let's see. We're going to know relatively soon. That's what I keep telling Henny, right? It's like we've got this narrow window of time, so we're going to know whether we're making a difference or not pretty quickly. But I just hope that it has an impact earlier than just the kids who come through, right?
Yes,
That it's
I
sending a
agree.
message.
I agree. That's why we keep working now on other things like presentations like this. So, are there any other questions? Would anyone else like to make a comment? Okay, we are actually out of time for the webinar. And I would like to thank Jennifer and Henny again for wonderful presentation. And the materials, please take the time to look at their materials. They're very nicely developed and totally free access, which is terrific for people who would like to have a chance to look at this. Thank you very much, Jennifer and Henny. It was a wonderful presentation, and we really appreciate what you've brought to us. Thanks
Yeah,
very
thank you
much.
for having us.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us. And I also just want to say special thanks to Henny while I have her in front of everybody, because she's really been like a big driver behind all the systems work. And I know that her collaboration and work and exposure to all of you has been a factor in that too. So all the things that you're doing is also feeding into what we're doing through Henny. And I want to say a huge public thanks to her for that.
Yes, thank you, Henny. And she's helped us a lot with some other work that we were doing, especially too. So thank you very much, Henny. Well, time to say goodbye. Thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate all of you, and especially our presenters. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Goodbye. Have a nice
Bye.
evening or day or night.
Yes, whatever. Right. Absolutely. Okay. Bye.